So the theme of this webinar addresses an affordability approach for evaluating IT systems. No arguing the importance of IT to the business organization. And in fact, for some sorts of organizations, IT is really the backbone of the business. Take, for example, financial services or insurance companies. So while IT is considered a cost center, or at least a consumer of resources and maybe not directly generating revenue, it can and does contribute to the bottom line. So the purpose of the affordability analysis is to evaluate a risk-adjusted total ownership cost and return on investment for system decisions, as well as to evaluate alignment and suitability to business objectives. So specifically, this webinar will discuss a process for conducting affordability analysis of IT investments relating to both deployment as well as maintenance and operation costs. So the key points here, I've got kind of three main objectives. One is that realistic and thoughtful affordability analysis will point you toward the sound business decisions. A defined and repeatable process is needed to analyze affordability, especially when you have many projects to look at and many people doing those studies. And then lastly, affordability can point you in the right direction of the best value, which is maybe not always the cheapest option or the one with the quote-unquote greatest performance. So here we have an outline of a 10-step affordability process to determine best value. This process was developed actually by Dan Gallerath, who has also developed a 10-step process for estimation. Now, what is really important here is not that you have 10 steps or the exact the particulars, but that you have a process that is there to address cost, schedule, performance, return on investment, as well as the risks and uncertainty that surround a system investment or a decision. So I'll be speaking to each of these steps in detail, but here's kind of a super quick overview. The first step is to identify what we call the key performance parameters. And these are the ones that are the most important, the ones, the quality or criteria that absolutely must be met. The next step is to identify other affordability goals and figures of merit. And these are basically metrics that are to be considered as part of this, but not necessarily ones that will cause a go, no-go decision on the system. The third step is to gather information, requirements, and features. In order to perform this type of analysis, of course, you need data, you need information. And data is not always just numbers that you get from the accounting system. This can be a lot of qualitative information and oftentimes can include opinions and judgment. And I'll be talking about how you can kind of wrangle those things. Fourth step, define your alternatives. Alternatives could be in terms of different architectures, different technologies, potentially different vendors, and even different business model objectives. Fifth step basically is to perform the technical design analysis of each alternative. What differentiates one alternative from another, and how does that change the assumptions in how you're going to analyze these things? For instance, what are the key tests that need to be done, labor rates, experience levels, and so on. Step 6 is for actually perform the cost and schedule analysis of each one and evaluate how the alternatives impact both cost and schedule. Step 7 deals with actually looking at not only that, but the benefits and the figures of merit. And that's really a way of aligning cost against performance in a kind of a simple way. The 8th step deals with looking at risk, actually applying the uncertainty to the analysis. When we're talking about affordability and investment, there's oftentimes quite a bit of uncertainty, the unknowns, and you want to be able to capture that as a part of it. Step 9 is to assess the alternatives and basically pick the right one, and step 9 should fall out of all the other previous steps. Step 10 is just one that we always emphasize in affordability and estimation processes, and that is document, document, document. By the way, these steps do represent somewhat of an order, but they aren't always purely sequential. There's another note on the slide too. Pricing strategies and things like that will be considered as part of a figure of merit or the benefits of a system. Okay, so moving on to a little bit more about the first step. And the first step is to identify the key performance parameters. Now, you probably have heard the term KPI, key performance indicator, very similar type of thing, but in this context, the key performance parameter, the operative term here is key, and what it means is that the objective of this must be met for the project to move forward. So if it doesn't, for instance, if your objective is, you might be developing a system to, allow your customers to set up automatic payments or paperless billing within your website. And maybe one of the objectives is to, increase paperless billing by 20%. But really, maybe the key objective is to reduce the number of account agents in the call center by a certain number. So there may be multiple objectives, but the ones that are the key to make the project a go are the ones that you want to identify as what we call the KPPs, or the key performance parameters. And there may be more than one. So what makes a good key performance parameter? Here are just a number of criteria that relate to that. First of all, it must be essential. It must be an essential requirement or result of that capability being evaluated. Next, it should indicate some improvement. It should improve things, the improvement in terms of the operational capability. In the example that I just gave, the improvement would be a reduction in staff forces, a required staff, in this case, account agents. It must be realistic. When everyone wants to say, oh yeah, I want to do something where I'm going to triple sales. Well, there may not be any whiz-bang system change that will actually make that happen. So it's not necessarily useful. So it's got to be a reasonably achievable goal. The next one is that it must be measurable. There should be a way, an objective way, of evaluating whether that goals are met. This is usually easy to grasp for qualitative quantitative KPPs, things like if you're measuring numbers, cost, dollars, headcount. For things like improving customer satisfaction, that's a little less tangible, but you can measure it through things like focus groups or surveys. It should take the long view. As we're looking at affordability, you're usually looking at not just upfront costs, but looking at costs over time and benefits over time. So a good KPP should consider long-term benefits.